Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm here with Maggie Robbins. We're talking about EMDR in a group context. And Maggie, I'm wondering if you would introduce yourself to
Sure.
everyone.
I'm Maggie Robbins. I'm an LPC. I am in Colorado. I've been a EMDR approved consultant since 2020 and a group therapist my entire career. So when I did basic training in 2009, my group experience and EMDR experience were kind of parallel. And then eventually they just started merging. So
Excellent. Many EMDR therapists listening to this are going to have no idea what EMDR even looks like in a group context. Do you
Mhm.
kind of sketch that out broadly so that people even know what we're talking
Sure.
about? Yeah.
Yeah, so what people mostly probably know about is providing in a crisis situation. So GTAP or IGDP or ASSIST or a lot of those protocols are really designed for a group context in a crisis situation. And so that really is where I got the beginning of my experience and have continued to respond in a group format. But my personal interest is in ongoing psychotherapy groups where EMDR is brought in, and is really the lens that I look through at all times. So it's also the lens that I look at my groups through. So adapting all 8 phases to a group setting can be the therapists who come to talk to me about that really can't have a trouble imagining what that might look like. So I've tried to help sketch that out.
Yes, help us. So what might that look like in the
Right.
in the assorted phases? Yeah. Or at least the way you do, the way that you conceptualize it and do it. So yeah.
Yeah, so my view is that we are all really lonely and isolated as a species in general right now, and COVID really brought that, to our attention that that was true. And then if we think about our trauma clients, how much isolation, rejection, shame, almost every single EMDR target I've ever reprocessed has some element of that. And so bringing people together to start looking at their own history through the lens that this is really a collective experience, not an individual experience, starts to loosen things up right from the start. So, so resourcing, for example, in a group format, that the group really becomes a resource. And so we no longer have to think about like um, bringing someone in or bringing a resource in. It's right here in the present moment. The group is the resource, and we can install that in the moment when there's a moment of connection or a moment of resonance or something like that. It's right here in the here and now. So deepens that exponentially.
Okay, excellent. And
Hmm.
then play that forward into like phases 3 and 4. What does that
Hmm. Hmm.
look like?
Yeah, so I do use writing or prompts and things like that, since again, there's a whole bunch of people doing this at once. I do feel pretty, I like people to be well resourced and understanding their own processes if they're in a group, because I can't attend individually. And so if the group is the resource, and then they're also doing their individual work, it's like, how do we kind of toggle back and forth between that? And so in phase 3, for example, there'll be writing prompts where they're writing down their own experiences. And then when we move into reprocessing, that is more of an individual experience. And typically there are themes that the group is bringing up together. So, for example, I see a lot of HSPs. We all do, highly sensitive
Mhm.
persons. So they might come in with a collective experience of that. And then I think it's helpful for the targets to come out of that collective experience versus, again, kind of like randomly selecting targets out of their history. It's like,
Yeah.
what is the group eliciting that
Mhm.
we then
Yeah.
reprocess?
Does that mean that there's kind of maybe even a shared energy in the room? Kind of a
Absolutely.
shared resonance in the room?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Can you say a little bit more about what that looks like? So processing, I mean, are people sitting around the table tapping themselves,
Hmm.
and then you're doing checking in generally, and then they're writing it down, or how does this look like mechanistically? Yeah.
Right. So I've experienced or experimented with GTIP and IGTP, and as I've gone on, neither of those felt quite right to me for ongoing groups. So, yes, there still is writing. So, similar to both of those, that they're using paper, they check in individually and document as we're going. And then at a couple points during the reprocessing, I like to check in with the group as a whole and see where we're at. But yes, in general, they are doing their own individual work at that point. And then at the end, I like to bring them back to the group and back to the collective resourcing, and people can share what's coming up at that point, and then making that a group experience again, that they can kind of ride the wave of each other's positive adaptive material that's coming up out of the reprocessing.
Excellent. So the group processes may be a place for people to actually grow some of the adaptive information that may be needed. So if I didn't get
Mhm.
enough of something, I'm seeing someone else connect
Mhm.
with that adaptive information. It may be enough of a rehearsal for me a few weeks later to be
Mhm.
able to, have enough for the difficult stuff to connect with. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
in the earlier phases too, that the group is kind of,
Yeah.
enhancing each other.
I'm getting the sense because one of the things that I've encountered with groups, just like throwing people together, I mean,
Mhm.
we assume that people used to heal communally,
Right.
before a
Right.
long time ago. But one of the things I've learned in just like putting like Zoom groups together is that
Mhm.
nobody knows each other. So
Right.
that may not, so it sounds like you're spending time like growing
Mhm.
group dynamic and letting people feel comfortable with the group process as a whole so that the group can be grounding and a resource.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
EMDR phases also model the stages of group development. That in
Excellent.
the earlier phases we're forming, right? Forming and norming and, getting to know each other, sharing history.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then resourcing based on what's coming up.
Okay. Excellent. Good.
Mhm.
What are some advantages in working this way?
Mm. I think one of the most profound experiences I've had in one of my EMDR groups is that everyone was in resonance, and all the heads start bobbing and everyone's feeling connected to each other. And someone looked around and like took it in, and she's like, "This is where shame comes to die."
Beautiful.
Hmm.
Right.
So, yeah, like really loosening those things that it can be like the stickiest pieces in individual EMDR therapy, like getting that to loosen up in a collective experience. And to your point, that is how we are meant to heal.
Yeah.
Um, my inspiration came after a flood in my area that was like 1,000-year flood. So it impacted the entire state. And one city in particular was really collectively damaged, and the road to them was destroyed. And so I kept hearing stories from them, and I had this kind of I don't know, moment of inspiration where I was picturing the whole town together with story and movement and fire, and it felt like tribal. Um,
So
so
if people are interested in learning more about, first, kind of more about group processes generally, and
mm,
then maybe more about what you do specifically, we can put links in the chat. But do you mind just giving a kind of an overview of what it would look like if people were interested in getting trained in group EMDR, generally and specifically the way you do it?
I do think I benefited from taking some of the trainings like GTIP and IGTP and things like that. I think that was beneficial to me to get a kind of a baseline understanding. So those are out there and accessible. And then I have a 3-credit training on adapting all 8 phases to ongoing therapeutic groups. So that's on my website, which I'm assuming we'll put in the links.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then um, I am working with a colleague to develop more of a general kind of group training. So
Yeah.
that on my website as well.
Excellent.
But
Good.
group therapy is a big modality to learn. So,
Yeah.
mhm,
Absolutely. Excellent. Is there
mhm.
anything else that you'd want people to know about group therapy or in general or
I
yeah.
think when people think of EMDR therapy in a group format, they immediately go to phase four and they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know how I would do that. I can't picture that, the intensity of that. Like, I don't think so. But that is not where I started. And that's where not where I would want people to start. It's like, can you think of four clients on your caseload that kind of need each other? And to just start thinking about putting them together and doing some resourcing or some kind of collective experience that we don't have to jump to phase four, that
Yeah.
EMDR therapy is more than that. So
Yeah. And we also don't have to jump to a worst case scenario of eight people
exactly.
struggling concurrently in a group context,
Exactly.
when in fact that may not be what the actual experience is when people are well prepared and ready for this process. So,
Exactly. And it doesn't tend to happen. They keep each other. Um, that resonance really does keep people stable through it, from what I've seen.
okay, excellent.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time and thank you for being here. And I'll have in chat ways that people can connect with the resources that we've talked about and connect to your upcoming training. So thank you for being here. It's nice meeting you, and
Oh,
hopefully we can connect soon.
yeah. And thank you for your platform. You're doing a lot for the community.
Okay, thank you.